January 1943, the South Pacific, 100 feet below the surface. The air is thick, heavy with the smell of diesel oil, cigarette smoke, and unwashed men. Condensation drips from every pipe. The temperature hovers near 100 degrees, 70. Men breathe the same stale air, recirculated now for 18 hours. In the forward torpedo room of the USS Guardfish, there is no privacy, no quiet. The hum of electric motors vibrates through the hull, and in the center of this cramped steel tube filling every inch of available space lie the torpedoes. 24 of them, 24 Mark 14s, each one 21 feet long, each one packed with 500 pounds of Torpex explosive, each one capable of tearing a hole in the side of a ship or, if something goes wrong, tearing this boat apart from the inside. Torpedoman's mate, Second Class James Carter, runs his hand along the smooth steel casing of number 7. It is cold despite the heat. He checks the depth mechanism for the third time, checks the firing pin, checks the arming vane. Around him, his shipmates sleep in bunks woven between the torpedoes, their bodies inches from high explosives. A man turns over, and his elbow taps the guidance fin of a live torpedo. No one flinches. This is normal. In the conning tower above, the periscope slides up. The captain sees a shape on the horizon, a freighter, unescorted. The word passes in a whisper: Battle Stations Torpedo. In the forward room, Carter feels the change before he hears it. The tension, the silence. The sudden focus of 20 men who now have one job. He kneels beside number 7, waits for the firing order. 3,000 pounds of steel and explosive sit inches from his face, ready to be launched into the darkness, ready to kill. But in a submarine, the torpedo is not just a weapon. It is a liability. And for the men who live beside them, sleep beside them, and breathe beside them for months at a time, the deadly reality of the torpedo room is this: every torpedo is a promise to the enemy, and a promise to themselves. Because if one of these fish decides to explode the wrong way, there will be no warning. No second chance, just a flash of light in the deep, and then nothing. The forward torpedo room of a fleet submarine is the most dangerous workplace in the United States Navy. To understand why, you have to understand the war that sent these men into the depths and the flawed weapons they were trusted to carry. December 1941, Pearl Harbor still burns. Black smoke rises from Battleship Row, the Pacific Fleet, the pride of the United States Navy, lies in ruin, its great warships either sunk or crippled. 8 battleships, 3 cruisers, 3 destroyers, more than 2,400 Americans dead. The offensive power of the United States in the Pacific has been destroyed in a single morning. But beneath the smoke and the oil slicks, something survives, something moves. Along the piers of the submarine base, the sleek, dark shapes of fleet submarines sit low. In the water, they are not pretty ships. They are 311 feet of welded steel, designed not for glory but for stealth. The Gatto class and her near sisters are about to become the tip of the American spear. The strategic situation is desperate. The United States has no choice. With the surface fleet gone, the only weapon left to carry the war to the Japanese Empire is the submarine. The order comes down from Washington: unrestricted warfare, no warning, no rescue. Every Japanese merchant ship, every tanker, every freighter carrying oil from the Dutch East Indies or rice from occupied Indochina, fair game. The submarine force is ordered to strangle Japan. This is a mission the Gatto class was never designed for. Conceived in the 1930s as fleet submarines, these boats were meant to scout ahead of the battle line, to act as eyes for the battleships. Their design reflects this original purpose: long range, high surface speed, heavy torpedo armament. They can travel 11,000 nautical miles without refueling. They can stay at sea for 75 days. They carry enough food and fresh water to keep a crew of 70 men alive for months. But now the battleships are gone. The fleet submarines have become commerce raiders, the modern equivalent of the Confederate commerce raiders of the Civil War, or the German U-boats that had nearly strangled Britain a generation earlier. The forward torpedo room of a Gatto-class submarine is the business end of this weapon. It is a cramped cylindrical space, roughly 30 feet long and no more than 15 feet wide at Its broadest, the curvature of the pressure hull closes in on itself, squeezing the space. Along both sides and in the center lie the torpedoes. 6 torpedo tubes line the forward. Bulkhead 4 above, 2 below, each tube is loaded, and surrounding them stacked. In racks secured by chains, lying in every available inch of space, are the reloads. 24 torpedoes in total, 24 Mark 14s. In this space, 12 to 15 men live, eat, sleep, and work. They sleep in bunks woven. Between the torpedoes, 3-tiered racks so close together that a man cannot sit up without hitting his head on the man above him. The bunks are 22 inches wide. There is no privacy, there is no quiet. The ventilation system barely works. The heat from the diesel engines from the galley, from 70 human bodies, radiates through the boat. In the torpedo room, temperatures routinely exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And always the smell, diesel fuel, cooking oil, unwashed bodies, the faint, acrid tang of battery acid, the metallic scent of torpedo components, the grease on the guide rails, the alcohol in the fuel tanks, the Torpex explosive in the warheads. The men who work here are not officers. They are enlisted men, torpedomen's mates. Mostly they are young, 19, 20, 22. They come from farms in Iowa, from factories in Detroit, from fishing villages in Maine. They volunteered for submarines, drawn by the promise of extra pay and the mystique of the silent service. They did not volunteer to sleep next to 3,000 pounds of high explosive. But that is precisely what they do, every night, every patrol, for weeks at a time. The forward torpedo room is not just a workspace. It is a home, it is a bunkroom, it is a storage locker, and it is a bomb. Because the Mark 14 torpedo, the weapon these men are trusted to maintain and operate, is not reliable, it is not safe. It is, in fact, a catastrophe waiting to happen. And the men who designed it, the men who built it, the men who insisted it was perfect, they are thousands of miles away, safe behind desks in Washington and Newport, Rhode Island. Here in the forward torpedo room, there is no safety. There is only the fish, and the fish has problems. The Mark 14 torpedo was supposed to be the most advanced underwater weapon in the world. Instead, it became a death sentence for the enemy, yes, but first for the confidence, the morale, and sometimes the lives of the men who fired it. Newport, Rhode Island, 1926. In a carefully controlled test tank, engineers from the Naval Torpedo Station watch as a Mark 14 torpedo runs its course. The water is clear, the conditions are perfect. The torpedo performs exactly as designed. The engineers nod in satisfaction. The Mark 14 is certified for production. What they do not know, what they cannot know, is that the test tank has lied to them. The Mark 14 torpedo is 21 feet long. It weighs more than 3,000 pounds. It carries a 668-pound warhead filled with Torpex, a new explosive compound more powerful than TNT. It is powered by a steam turbine engine, fueled by alcohol and compressed air, capable of driving the weapon at 46 knots for more than 4,500 yards. In theory, it is the most advanced submarine torpedo in the world. In practice, it is a disaster. 3 catastrophic defects plague the Mark 14, 3 separate failures, each one capable of turning a perfect attack into a deadly frustration, and for the first 2 years of the war, the men in the forward torpedo rooms will bear the brunt of every single one. The first defect is discovered by accident. In the spring of 1942, submariners begin to notice something strange. They are aiming at enemy ships. They are calculating range and deflection perfectly. They are firing from ideal positions, and their torpedoes are missing again and again. The skippers are certain of their aim. The torpedoes must be running deeper than set. The Bureau of Ordnance in Washington refuses to believe it. Their test tank says the torpedoes run true. The problem must be the skippers, or the crews, or the ships, not the torpedo. But in June 1942, off the coast of Western Australia, a simple experiment proves the Bureau wrong. Technicians stretch a large fishnet across a bay. They fire 3 Mark 14s. Set to run at 10 feet. The first tears through the net at 18 feet, the second at 25 feet. The third, set for the surface, passes at 11 feet. The torpedoes are running, on average, 11 feet deeper than set. The cause is simple. The depth control mechanism relies on a seawater inlet, a small sensor that measures water pressure to determine depth. On the Mark 14, this inlet is located near the tail. Engineers at Newport had tested the mechanism with dummy warheads which are lighter than live ones. The weight difference changes the torpedoes. Trim and the location of the sensor means it reads pressure incorrectly when the torpedo is in motion. The result, every Mark 14 runs deep. The fix is equally simple. Submariners begin setting their torpedoes for 10 feet shallower than the target's actual draft. It is a workaround, not a solution, but it works. The second defect is more insidious. The Mark 14 is equipped with the Mark 6 magnetic exploder, a device copied from captured German torpedoes. In theory, it is brilliant. The exploder creates a magnetic field when the torpedo passes under a steel-hulled ship. The distortion in the Earth's magnetic field triggers the warhead. The explosion occurs directly beneath the keel, the most vulnerable part of any vessel. A single torpedo, properly placed, can break a ship's back. But the Germans had abandoned their magnetic exploder years earlier. It was too unreliable, too sensitive, too prone to premature detonation. The Americans do not know this. In combat, the Mark 6 exploder behaves erratically. Sometimes it works perfectly, sending a Japanese freighter to the bottom in seconds. More often, it detonates early, hundreds of yards short of the target, or as it passes through the turbulence of the submarine's own wake. The explosion is spectacular and useless. The torpedo leaves a plume of white water. The target sails on unharmed. The skippers are furious. They begin to quietly disable the magnetic exploders, set their torpedoes to detonate on contact only. This is technically illegal. Tampering with government ordnance is a court-martial offense, but the skippers do it anyway. They would rather face a court-martial than watch another perfect attack fail. By mid-1943, Admiral Charles Lockwood, commander of submarines in the Pacific, takes their side. He presents the evidence to Admiral Chester Nimitz. Nimitz issues the order: disable the magnetic exploders. The premature detonations stop. But the third defect remains. On July 24, 1943, the submarine USS Tenosa stalks a prime target. The Tonin Maru III is a 19,000-ton tanker, one of the largest in the Japanese fleet. She is fully loaded. She is unescorted. She is sitting dead in the water. Commander Dan Daspit maneuvers into position. He fires 4 torpedoes from the forward room. 2 hit. Smoke billows from the tanker, but the tanker does not sink. Daspit closes to 900 yards. He fires 2 more. Both hit. Nothing. He fires another, and another, and another. In the forward torpedo room, the crew works frantically. The air is thick with the smell of burnt powder and sweat. The torpedoes are passed from the racks to the tubes, loaded. Flooded, fired. The tanker sits there, wounded but afloat, taking hit after hit after hit. 15 torpedoes, 15 hits, every single one a dud. Daspit saves his last torpedo. He takes it back to Pearl Harbor as evidence. The warhead is removed. The contact exploder is examined. The problem becomes clear. When the torpedo strikes a target at a perfect 90-degree angle, the ideal firing position, the impact crushes the firing mechanism before it can detonate. The steel firing pin block is too heavy. The brass guide posts that hold it in place collapse under deceleration. The pin never reaches the detonator. The fix is developed in the torpedo shop at Pearl Harbor. Replace the steel block with aluminum. Reinforce the guideposts. The modified exploder works. It becomes known as the Pearl Harbor modification. By the late summer of 1943, all 3 defects are finally corrected. The Mark 14 becomes the weapon it was always meant to be. But for the men in the forward torpedo rooms, the crisis is not just about technology. It is about trust. For 2 years, they have risked their lives to bring these weapons to the enemy. For 2 years, they have watched their best efforts fail, not because of enemy action, but because of faulty equipment. For 2 years, they have lived beside these 3,000-pound bombs, knowing that if one of them decides to malfunction in the wrong way, there will be no warning, no second chance. The Mark 14 crisis is a story of bureaucratic failure, but it is also a story of human Endurance, because even with flawed weapons, even with dud torpedoes, even with odds stacked against them, the submariners kept going. They had no choice. The war was waiting. And in the forward torpedo room, the next fish was already being loaded into the tube. The technological failures of the Mark 14 were only one part of the story. The other part, the human part, happened in the cramped, hot, dangerous space where the torpedoes lived and where the men lived with them. The forward torpedo room is not designed for comfort, it is designed for war, but men must live there anyway. Sleeping arrangements are determined by geometry. There are 24 torpedoes and only 12 bunks. The solution is hot bunking. 2 men share the same bunk. Rotating shifts, 1 man sleeps while the other works. The mattress never cools. The sheets never dry. The bunks themselves are woven between the torpedoes. A man lies on his back and, inches from his face, a Mark 14 warhead stares back at him. 500 pounds of torpex, enough explosive to vaporize this entire compartment, enough to send the boat to the bottom before anyone can react. No one thinks about this, or rather, everyone thinks about it, but no one talks about it. It is the price of admission, the cost of being a submariner. The smell is impossible to describe. Diesel fumes permeate everything: clothing, skin. Food, the coffee tastes like diesel, the bread tastes like diesel, the men themselves smell like diesel mixed with sweat and the faint, sweet odor of torpedo alcohol. After a week at sea, no one notices anymore. Their noses have stopped working. Meals are eaten wherever there is space. A man sits on a torpedo skid, balancing his tray. On his knees, the tray slides. Food spills onto the deck plates. He cleans it up with a rag. That smells like oil. Tomorrow, he will do it again. Conversation is constant. The ventilation system is loud, but the men are louder. They talk about home, about girls, about the war, about the fish. Always the fish. How many they have left, how many they have fired, how many have hit. At night, the compartment is lit by red battle lanterns. The red light preserves night vision. It also makes everything look surreal. The torpedoes, the men, the bunks, all bathed in crimson. A visitor might think he has stepped into hell. For the men who live here, it is just home. Above in the conning tower, the torpedo data computer clicks and whirs. It is an analog computer, gears, cams, differentials, capable of solving complex firing solutions in seconds. The input comes from the periscope: target bearing, target angle on the bow, estimated range and speed. The output goes to the torpedoes. In the forward room, the torpedo men wait. The firing order comes down: set depth 10 feet, set gyro angle 345. On each torpedo, a small panel opens. The torpedoman turns a dial, setting the depth. Mechanism: he adjusts the gyro angle, aligning the torpedo's internal compass with the firing solution. These adjustments are precise. A fraction of a degree can mean the difference between a hit and a miss. The torpedoes are already in the tubes. Loading is a separate evolution, one that requires brute force and careful coordination. To load a torpedo, the crew must first move it from the storage racks to the tube. The torpedo weighs more than a ton. It is moved using chain hoists attached to overhead rails. A dozen men strain against the weight, guiding the fish inch by inch into the loading position. The tube breech is massive, a heavy steel door that swings open on hydraulic hinges. Inside, the tube is dark, greasy, just wide enough to accept the torpedo. The crew pushes, the torpedo slides in, the breech closes, the tube is flooded to equalize pressure with the sea. The outer door opens. Now they wait. The firing button is in the conning tower, but the real work happens forward. When the command comes, fire 1, a rush of high-pressure air ejects the torpedo from the tube. In the forward room, the men hear a distinct whoosh, followed by the sound of the torpedo's engine igniting, a deep, rhythmic chugging. The torpedo is alive, it is running. It is heading for the target. The attack is over. The torpedoes have hit, or they have missed. Either way, the submarine is no longer hidden. On the surface, the destroyers begin their hunt. In the forward torpedo room, the men hear at first a faint, high-pitched ping. The enemy's active sonar, then another ping, louder this time, closer. The submarine goes deep. The captain orders silent running. Fans shut off, motors stop. Men freeze in place. In the forward room, the torpedomen stand motionless beside their fish, listening. The screws of the destroyer are audible now, a rhythmic thump-thump-thump as the propellers beat the water. The sound grows louder. The destroyer is passing overhead. Then silence. For a moment, the men allow themselves to hope. Maybe the enemy has lost contact. Maybe they are safe. Then the depth charges come. The first explosion is not a sound, it is a physical force. The hull slams inward then. Rebounds, the men are thrown against the torpedoes. The lights flicker, water sprays. From a leaking valve, another explosion, closer this time. The boat twists, a torpedoman grabs the nearest handhold, a warhead, to keep from falling. This is the worst part of being in the forward room. In the control room, the officers have some sense of what is happening. They can see the depth gauge, they can hear the sonar, they can maneuver. Here in the bow there is nothing, only the explosions, only the darkness, only the torpedoes rattling in their racks, each one a potential bomb. The men look at each other, they do not speak, there is nothing to say. If a depth charge lands close enough, the shock might set off a warhead. If that happens, they will never know. There will be no pain, no fear, just a flash and then nothing. The attack lasts for hours. The destroyers drop pattern after pattern. The submarine twists and turns, trying to escape. In the forward room, the men wait. They cannot fight back, they cannot run, they can only endure. Finally, the screws fade, the pings stop, the destroyer gives up. The captain orders periscope depth, the boat rises. In the forward room, the torpedomen begin to breathe again. They check the fish, check the seals, check each other. Another patrol, another near miss. Tomorrow, they will do it all again. The men in the forward torpedo room are not officers. They are not heroes in the traditional sense. They are technicians, plumbers, mechanics, electricians who happen to work in the most dangerous place on the boat. Their job is to keep the fish ready, to fire them when ordered, and to survive the consequences. But their job also requires something else, something harder. It requires leadership. In the forward torpedo room, rank matters less than experience. The officer responsible for the compartment is the torpedo officer, usually a junior lieutenant fresh from submarine school, his knowledge of torpedoes theoretical at best. He stands in the doorway, clipboard in hand, reciting procedure from memory. The men listen, they nod, they wait for him to leave. When he does, the real work begins. The chief of the boat, the senior enlisted man on the submarine, runs the forward room. He is a torpedoman's mate chief, usually 20 years in the Navy, 10 years in submarines. He has seen things the young officer has only read about. He knows which depth settings work and which fail. He knows which firing pins are reliable and which need to be replaced. He knows how to calm a green crew when the depth charges start falling. His authority is absolute, not because of his rank, although his crow is impressive, but because of his knowledge. The men trust him. They trust him with their lives. When a torpedo misfires, when the firing circuit fails and a live fish sits in the tube, its engine sputtering, its warhead armed, the chief is the one who fixes it. He crawls into the tube, past the guidance fins, past the warhead to reach the malfunction. He works by feel, by touch, by instinct. One wrong move, one slip, one static spark, that is all it takes. The men watch him go. They do not breathe. They do not speak. They wait. He comes back out, sweat pouring down his face, a broken part in his hand. He grins. She's fixed. Load the next one. The men breathe again. This is leadership in the torpedo room, not speeches, not medals, just a man who knows his job, doing it so that everyone else can do theirs. Before the war, the United States condemned unrestricted submarine warfare. After Pearl Harbor, everything changed. The change happened slowly, then all at once. In the forward torpedo rooms, the men do not debate the morality of their mission. They do not discuss the Geneva Conventions or the rules of prize warfare. They do not think about the civilians on the ships they sink. They think about survival. They think about their shipmates. They think about getting home. But the moral weight of their job is always there, just below the surface, unspoken, unacknowledged, present. The Japanese merchant marine is not a military target in the traditional sense. The ships carry oil, rice, rubber, or the raw materials of empire, but they also carry passengers. Civilians, women, children. When a torpedo hits a tanker, the fire burns for hours. When it hits a troopship, the water fills with men screaming in a language the submariners do not understand. The submariners do not see this. They are underwater, miles away, already diving deep to escape the counterattack, but they know what they have done, they know what it means. Some men struggle with this knowledge, others compartmentalize it, push it down, lock it away, focus on the next mission. A few embrace it. They see the Japanese as the enemy, nothing more, nothing less. They do not lose sleep over sinking ships. The Navy does not help them process these feelings. There are no psychiatrists on submarines, no counseling services, no debriefings. When a patrol ends, the men go ashore, they drink, they fight, they find women, they try to forget. But the forgetting never lasts. The next patrol is always waiting, and in the forward torpedo room, the fish are already being loaded. By late 1943, the Mark 14 has been fixed, but the war does not stop. The torpedo men do not rest. New torpedoes arrive. The Mark 18 is electric, weightless, silent, invisible to the enemy. But electric torpedoes use batteries, and batteries can explode. In the forward room, the torpedomen treat the Mark 18s with a new kind of respect. They check the battery compartments constantly. They watch for hydrogen gas buildup. They know that one spark, one short circuit, one moment of inattention, and the compartment will become an inferno. The Mark 23 is a high-speed variant, 46 knots, straight-running, designed for fast attacks. It has no homing capability, no complex guidance, just speed and power. The torpedomen love it. Simple is safe, simple is reliable. But simple is rare. Most torpedoes are complicated, most require constant maintenance. Most can kill you if you make a mistake. The torpedomen adapt. They learn the quirks of each fish. They develop workarounds. For the flaws that remain, they share information between boats, what works, what fails, what to watch for. They become experts in weapons they were never trained to understand. By 1944, the Mark 14 is finally reliable. The Mark 18 is improving. The submarine force is sinking Japanese ships faster than Japan can build them. The tide has turned. But the work in the forward torpedo room never stops. The fish must be loaded. The tubes must be maintained. The attacks must be executed. The counterattacks must be survived. And the men must live beside the explosives, day after day, week after week, month after month. The war will not end until the fish stop running. The technical fixes and the leadership lessons prepared the submarine force for the great battles of 1944, but nothing could prepare them for what came next. In the fall of that year, the submarines would be called upon to execute the most daring operation of the Pacific War, and in the forward torpedo rooms, the men would face their greatest test. October 23, 1944, Palawan Passage, 75 miles off the Philippine coast. The water is black, no moon, no stars, just the deep, endless dark of the South China Sea before dawn. On the bridge of the USS Darter, Commander David McClintock raises his binoculars. His eyes ache from hours of staring into the night. His face is wet with spray. Below him, 70 men wait in the steel tube, their world reduced to gauges, dials, and the faint hum of electric motors. It is 1:16 in the morning. The radar operator's voice comes through the speaker. Contact, multiple contacts. Bearing 340, range 30,000 yards. McClintock feels his pulse quicken. He lifts the binoculars again, and there on the horizon he sees them. Ships, many ships, big ships. For a moment he does not speak. He counts. 1, 2, 5, 10. The shapes are indistinct, but the size is unmistakable. These are not freighters. These are not tankers. These are warships, the largest concentration of Japanese naval power since Pearl Harbor. McClintock does not know it yet, but he has just found the center force of Admiral Kurita, 5 battleships, 10 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, 15 destroyers, the most powerful surface fleet Japan has ever assembled, steaming north to destroy the American invasion force at Leyte Gulf. In the forward torpedo room of Darter, the men do not know what the captain sees. They only know the word that passes through the boat: targets, many targets. Torpedoman's mate Floyd Caverly sits beside number 3 tube. His hand rests on the breech. The steel is cool despite the heat of the compartment. Beside him, the other torpedomen wait in silence. They have done this before, but never like this. On the bridge, McClintock makes his decision. He cannot attack now, too far, too dark. Too many escorts, but he can track, he can follow, and he can call for help. He signals the Dace, Commander Bladen Claggett, patrolling nearby. The two submarines begin their stalk. For 4 hours, they run on the surface, pushing their diesel engines to the limit, staying just ahead of the Japanese formation. The men below feel the vibration of the engines, the slight roll of the boat as she turns. They do not sleep, they cannot sleep. The fish are ready. Dawn approaches. The sky begins to lighten in the east. At 5:10 a.m., Darter submerges. The sudden quiet is always jarring. The diesels cut. The electric motors take over, and the boat glides into the silence of the deep. In the forward torpedo room, the men listen to the rush of water against the hull. They wait. The periscope rises. McClintock sees them now clearly, unmistakably. The lead ship is massive, a heavy cruiser, then another, then another. They are in 2 columns. Steaming straight for his position, he identifies the first ship by her distinctive pagoda mast, Atego, flagship of Admiral Kurita himself. He has 90 seconds to make history. In the forward torpedo room, the firing order comes down. Set depth 12 feet, gyro. Angle 0, stand by all tubes. Torpedoman Caverly checks his settings. 12 feet, 0, he repeats the numbers. Aloud, the man next to him nods. The tubes are ready. Fire 1. A rush of compressed air. The torpedo leaves the tube. In the forward room, the men hear the familiar whoosh, then the chug of the engine as it arms and runs. Fire 2. Fire 3. Fire 4. 6 torpedoes leave Darter's bow in less than a minute. They streak through the water at 46 knots, leaving no wake, making no sound. In the forward room, the men count. 1,001, 1,002, 1,003. At 5:32 a.m., the first torpedo hits. The explosion is not a sound. It is a physical force that travels through the water and slams into Darter's hull. The men in the forward room are thrown against the torpedo. Racks, light bulbs shatter. A tool falls from a bulkhead before anyone can speak. 4 more explosions follow in rapid succession. On the surface, the Atego is dying. 4 torpedoes have torn open her hull. Water floods her engine rooms, her magazines, her crew quarters. She lists heavily to port. Fires rage. Amidships, Admiral Kurita, the commander of the most powerful fleet Japan has ever sent to sea, is thrown from his bridge into the water. He will survive, swimming through burning oil to be rescued by a destroyer, but his flagship is gone. At 5:53 a.m., the Atego capsizes and sinks, taking 360 of her crew with her. In Darter's forward torpedo room, the men hear the cheers from the control room. But there is no time to celebrate. The word comes down: reload, now. The torpedomen move. They have done this 100 times in drills, but this is not a drill. The Japanese fleet is still out there. Destroyers are already turning toward their position. Depth charges will be coming. Torpedoman Caverly grabs the chain hoist. The next fish weighs 3,000 pounds. He and 5 other men strain against the weight, lifting the torpedo from the storage rack. Swinging it toward the tube, sweat pours down their faces. The heat is unbearable, but they do not stop. A mile away, Dace is also attacking. Commander Claggett has held his fire, waiting for the perfect target. He watches the first 2 cruisers pass. Then he sees the third ship in the column, another heavy cruiser. The Maya. At 5:54 a.m., he fires all 6 forward torpedoes. 4 hit. The Maya does not have time to react. The explosions tear her apart. Within 4 minutes, she is gone, the fastest sinking of a major warship in the history of submarine warfare. 4 minutes, from full combat readiness to the bottom of the Palawan passage. In Dace's forward torpedo room, the men feel the shockwaves. They hear the breaking up of the cruiser overhead, the terrible, grinding, crackling sound of a 13,000-ton ship dying. For a few agonizing seconds, they wonder if it is their own boat breaking apart. Quick check confirms they are intact, but the relief is short-lived. The destroyers are coming. Darter and Dace have just pulled off the most devastating submarine attack of the Pacific War. 2 heavy cruisers sunk, a third, the Takao, crippled and dead in the water. Admiral Kurita swimming for his life, the Japanese center force thrown into chaos before it ever reaches the battle. But the attack is only the beginning. For the men in the forward torpedo rooms, the real ordeal is about to start. October 23, 1944, Palawan Passage, Philippines, 500 hours. The water is calm, the sky is still dark. On the surface, a fleet moves through the narrow strait between Palawan Island and the reefs that line the passage. It is the Imperial Japanese Navy's center force, the most powerful surface fleet Japan has sent to sea. Since Midway, 5 battleships, including the super battleships Yamato and Musashi, 10 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, 15 destroyers. They are steaming east toward the Philippines, toward the American invasion fleet at Leyte Gulf. They do not know they are being watched. 2 American submarines, USS Darter and USS Dace, have been patrolling these waters. For days, their captains, Commander David McClintock and Commander Bladen Claggett, have studied the charts, the currents, the Japanese traffic patterns. They know this passage, they know where the enemy must go, and they know that if the Japanese fleet reaches Leyte Gulf, the invasion will be a slaughter. Now in the pre-dawn darkness, their patience pays off. On board Darter, the radar operator sees them first. Blips on the screen, many blips. Large blips, he calls out the contact. McClintock is on the bridge in seconds. Through his binoculars, he sees them, the unmistakable silhouettes of Japanese warships. Silhouettes against the growing light. He counts, and counts again. This is not a convoy. This is the main battle fleet. McClintock makes a decision. He will not wait for permission. He will not call for support. He will attack. The word passes through Darter like an electric shock. Battle stations, torpedo room. Stand by. In the forward torpedo room of Darter, the men have been at general quarters for hours. They are tired, they are sweating, but when the word comes down, they snap into motion. Torpedoman's mate, First Class Henry Lopez, checks his fish for the 10th time. 6 torpedoes in the tubes, 6 more in the racks, ready for reload, all Mark 14s, all with the Pearl Harbor modifications, all reliable now, in a way they were not a year ago. But reliability is relative. Each torpedo still carries 500 pounds of torpex, each still has a contact exploder that must function perfectly, each still represents a promise and a danger. Lopez does not think about the danger, he thinks about his job, depth settings, gyro angles, firing sequences. Darter maneuvers into position. McClintock is a genius at this, bringing his boat between the enemy and the rising sun, using the glare to hide his periscope. The Japanese look east toward the light and see nothing. Darter lies to the west, invisible. The darkness. The range closes, 3,000 yards, 2,000, 1,500. McClintock picks his targets, the lead cruiser, Atago, Admiral Kurita's flagship, perfect. And behind her another cruiser, Takao, 2 fish for Atago, 2 for Takao, maybe a third for Atago, just to be sure. He gives the order, stand by forward tubes. In the torpedo room, Lopez hears the words in his headphones. He places his hand on the tube breech, feels the vibration of the boat, feels the tension of the men around him. No one speaks, no one moves. They are waiting, waiting for the word. Fire 1. The torpedo leaves the tube with a rush of air. The boat rocks slightly. The sound of the engine, a deep chugging roar, fills the water outside. Fire 2. Another fish, another rock, another roar. Fire 3. Lopez counts 3 fish for Atago. The 4th tube is for Takao. He waits. Fire 4. The 4th torpedo launches. Now they wait. Every man in the forward room counts the seconds in his head. The torpedoes are running, running true, running hot. On Darter, McClintock keeps his periscope up. He watches, he waits. Then he sees it. A massive column of water rises beside Atago, then another, then a third, 3 hits. 3 perfect hits. The Atago is mortally wounded. She lists immediately. Fires break out. Men jump into the water. Admiral Kurita himself is thrown from his bridge into the sea. He will be Rescued by a destroyer, but his flagship is gone. McClintock swings his periscope. The tacho has been hit too. She is on fire, dead in the water, listing heavily. In the forward torpedo room of Darter, the silence breaks. Men cheer. They slap each other on the back. They have done it. They have struck the enemy's main fleet. They have sunk a heavy cruiser. They have changed the course of the battle. But the battle is not over. The Japanese destroyers are already turning. They are hunting, and Darter is not alone. Somewhere to the south, Dace has also found the enemy, and her torpedo room is about to write its own chapter in history. The first blows have been struck, but the Japanese fleet is still steaming east, and in the forward torpedo rooms of 2 American submarines, the reloading has already begun. October 23, 1944, Palawan Passage, 5:30 hours. On Dace, Commander Bladen Claggett has watched the entire attack unfold through his periscope. He has seen Darter's torpedoes hit. He has seen the Atago begin to sink. He has seen the tacho crippled and burning. Now it is his turn. The Japanese formation is in chaos. Ships turn wildly, trying to avoid torpedoes that have already passed. Destroyers race toward Darter's position, dropping depth charges. Blindly, but in the confusion, the third cruiser in the column, the Maya, is left exposed. Claggett does not hesitate. He swings his periscope onto the target. The range is close, less than 1,000 yards. He cannot miss. Stand by forward tubes. In Dace's forward torpedo room, the atmosphere is different than on Darter. These men have watched their sister boat strike first. They have felt the frustration of waiting. Now, finally, their moment has come. Torpedoman's mate Robert Barnes stands by the firing panel. He is 22 years old. He has been in submarines for 2 years. He has fired torpedoes before, but never like this. Never at a target this big. Never at a ship that could sink his boat with a single salvo from her main batteries. The order comes, fire 1. Barnes presses the firing button. A rush of air. The boat rocks. Fire 2. Fire 3. 6 torpedoes leave Dace's tubes in less than a minute. They streak toward the Maya. The cruiser's lookout see nothing. Her sonar hears nothing. The torpedoes are running. Silent, running deep, running true. In the forward room, Barnes counts. He knows the range. He knows the torpedo speed. He knows exactly when they should hit. At 30 seconds, he hears it. The first explosion is massive, a deep, resonant boom that travels through the water and slams into Dace's hull. Before the sound fades, a second explosion follows, then a third, then a fourth. 4 hits, 4 perfect hits. On the surface, the Maya is dying. The explosions have torn open her hull. Water floods. Her engine rooms, fires reach her magazines. She lists heavily to port. Within 4 minutes, she will be gone. The fastest sinking of a major warship in the history of submarine warfare. In Dace's forward torpedo room, the men hear the breaking up of the ship overhead. It is an unforgettable sound, the grinding, crackling, tearing noise of 13,000 tons of steel collapsing in on itself. For a terrifying moment, they wonder if it is their own boat breaking apart, but the hull holds, the gauges hold, they are alive. The celebration is brief. The destroyers have found them. The first depth charge lands at 5:45. In Darter's forward torpedo room, Henry Lopez feels the explosion before he hears it. The hull slams inward, then rebounds. He is thrown against a torpedo rack. Lights flicker. A pipe leaks, a thin stream of water spraying into the compartment. Another explosion, closer this time. The Japanese are good. Their destroyers are fast, aggressive, well-trained. They drop pattern after pattern, working in teams, hurting the submarine like hunters driving game. In the forward room, the men brace. There is nothing they can do, no way to fight back. No way to run, they can only endure. The depth charges come in patterns, 6, then a pause, 6 more closer, then another pause. The Japanese are trying to bracket them, to find the exact depth and position, and drop the killing shot. Lopez looks at the men around him. Their faces are pale in the red battle lights. Sweat pours down their cheeks. They grip the torpedoes, the racks, anything solid. They do not speak. There is nothing to say. Another explosion. This one is close, very close. The boat lurches violently. A torpedo Shifts in its rack, the chains groaning under the strain. If one of those chains breaks, the fish will roll. If it rolls into another fish, the warheads could collide. If the warheads collide. Lopez pushes the thought away. He checks the chains. They hold. The attack continues for hours. On Dace, the same scene unfolds, the same explosions. The same terror, the same waiting. Finally, the screws fade, the pings stop, the destroyers give up. In Darter's forward room, no one moves for a long moment. Then, slowly, men begin to breathe again. Lopez checks his fish. All secure, all ready. He looks at the men around him. They are exhausted, they are shaken, but they are alive. The word comes down from the control room. Damage reports, all compartments. Lopez reports, forward room secure, all torpedoes ready. He does not add what he is thinking, that they were lucky, that next time they might not be, that the fish they sleep beside every night are still 3,000 pounds of high explosive, and the depth charges nearly turn them into a bomb. But that is the job, that is the reality of the torpedo room. By midday, the situation has changed. Darter and Dace have sunk 2 heavy cruisers and crippled a third. They have thrown the Japanese center force into chaos. They have delayed Kurita's advance, buying precious hours for the American invasion fleet. But they have also lost a boat. In the confusion of the attack, Darter runs aground on Bombay Shoal. The charts were wrong. The reef was closer than expected. Now the boat is stuck, hard aground, unable to move, with Japanese ships still nearby. The crew works frantically to free her. They try backing, they try flooding, they try everything. Nothing works. The boat is stuck fast. Commander McClintock makes the hardest decision of his life. He orders the crew to abandon ship. They will transfer to Dace. They will leave Darter behind. But they cannot leave the torpedoes. In the forward room, Lopez and his shipmates work quickly. They open the torpedo tube doors. They set the fish for running. They fire them, all of them, into the empty sea. 16 torpedoes, 16 fish, 16 weapons that will never reach their targets. Then they rig demolition charges. They set the timers. They leave. From the deck of Dace, the crew watches Darter burn. The demolition charges explode. Fire consumes the conning tower, the boat that sank at Tago, that changed the course of the battle, that carried them through the worst depth charge attack of their lives. Their home is dying. Lopez watches in silence. He thinks about the forward room, about the bunks woven between the fish, about the smell of diesel and sweat and torpex, about the men who slept there, ate there, lived there. He thinks about the torpedoes, the ones they fired, the ones that hit, the ones that didn't. And he thinks about the ones they left behind. The Battle of Leyte Gulf continues without Darter. The Japanese fleet is defeated. Decisively, permanently, the invasion of the Philippines succeeds. The war moves closer to Japan. But for the men of the torpedo rooms, the battle is never really over. It lives in them, in their memories, in their nightmares, in the smell of diesel fuel and the sound of depth charges and the feel of a torpedo's cold steel beneath their hands. They have done their job, they have done it well, but the cost, the physical, psychological, moral cost, is only beginning to become clear. December 1945, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The war is over. The surrender has been signed. Across the Pacific, American submarines are returning to their home ports for the last time. They tie up at the same piers where 4 years earlier they had departed for the first war patrols, the same piers where 4 years earlier the smoke still rose from Battleship Row. Now the smoke is gone, the battleships are repaired, but many submarines are missing. At the submarine base, the crews file off their boats for the final time. They carry duffel bags and sea bags and the accumulated possessions of years at war. They shake hands with their shipmates. They promise to keep in touch. They know they probably won't. In the forward torpedo rooms, the last torpedoes are being offloaded. The fish are going to storage, to warehouses, to depots, to the quiet darkness where weapons go when the fighting stops. The men who tended them, who slept beside them, who fired them at the enemy, those men are going home. But not all of them. The statistics are cold. They do not capture the heat of the torpedo room, the smell of diesel, the sound of depth charges, but they tell a story nonetheless. 52% of all Japanese merchant shipping sunk during the war. more than 5 million tons was destroyed by American submarines, 280. 8 Japanese warships, including 8 aircraft carriers, 11 battleships, and 23 cruisers, were sent to the bottom by submarine attack. These numbers are staggering. They represent the most successful commerce war in naval history. They strangled Japan's economy, cut off her oil supplies, and made victory possible. But the cost was equally staggering. Of the 16,000 Americans who served in submarines during World War II, 3,500 never came home. 22% of the submarine force was killed, the highest casualty rate of any American service branch in the entire war. 52 submarines were lost, 52 boats, 52 crews, 52 times that submarine left Pearl Harbor or Brisbane or Fremantle and never returned, 52 times that the families waited and finally received the telegram. In the forward torpedo rooms of those lost boats, the scene was always the same: men beside their fish, men doing their jobs, men facing the end in the darkness, thousands of feet below the surface, with no warning and no chance and no escape. Some were lost to depth charges, some to mines, some to mechanical failure, some simply vanished. No distress call, no last message, nothing. Just a boat that failed to report, and then the long, agonizing wait, and then the telegram. The men who survived carried different scars. Henry Lopez, the torpedoman from Darter, made it home. He returned to his family in California. He got married. He had children. He worked as a mechanic fixing cars using the same hands that had once tended torpedoes. But he never talked about the war, not to his wife, not to his children, not to anyone. When his son asked him, years later, what it was like on the submarine, Lopez just shook his head. "You don't want to know," he said. "You really don't want to know." What he did not say, what he could not say, was that he still heard the depth charges, still felt the explosions, still saw the red glow of the battle lanterns and the faces of the men beside him and the cold, patient steel of the torpedoes. He still smelled the diesel, he still smelled the sweat, he still smelled the torpex. In the forward torpedo room, those smells were just part of the job. Now, decades later, they were part of him. The survivors of the submarine force returned to a country that did not fully understand what they had done. The big battles, Midway, Leyte Gulf, Iwo Jima, dominated the headlines. The submariners worked in silence, and their sacrifice was equally silent. But the Navy knew, the Navy understood. In the official reports, in the after-action summaries, in the quiet acknowledgments of the High Command, the submarine force was given its due. Admiral Nimitz himself said, the submarines of the Pacific Fleet, by their aggressive and successful attacks on the Japanese Navy and Merchant Marine, played a decisive role in the victory over Japan. Decisive, that was the word. Decisive meant that without the submarines, the war would have lasted longer. Decisive meant that without the submarines, the invasion of Japan would have been necessary. Decisive meant that without the submarines, hundreds of thousands more Americans would have died. The torpedo room crews did not think in those terms. They thought in terms of fish in the water, depth charges in the water, air in the boat. They thought in terms of survival, of shipmates, of getting home. But their work, their sacrifice, their endurance, it mattered. It mattered more than they know. And for those who did not come home, the torpedo room became their grave, their final resting place, their memorial. 52 submarines, 52 crews, 3,500 men. Gone, but not forgotten. The survivors carried the memory. They carried it to reunions, to memorial services, to the quiet moments in the middle of the night when sleep would not come. They carried it in the way they flinched at sudden loud noises, in the way they checked door locks, twice in the way they never, ever talked about what they had done. And they carried it in their hands. Those hands had loaded torpedoes. Those hands had set depth controls. Those hands had touched the cold steel of the fish and the warm skin of dying shipmates. Those hands had done things that could never be undone. The war was over, but for the men of the torpedo rooms, the war was never really over. 1946, the Naval Torpedo Station, Newport, Rhode Island. The same facility where the Mark 14 was certified as perfect 20 years earlier now. houses a different kind of activity. Engineers and officers pore over after-action reports, patrol logs, and technical evaluations. They are writing the history of the torpedo war. They are trying to understand what went wrong and what went right. The conclusions are damning. The Mark 14 torpedo, the official inquiry finds, was sent to war with 3 catastrophic defects that should have been discovered during testing: the deep running problem, the magnetic exploder failures, the contact exploder defects. All were avoidable. All were the result of peacetime complacency, inadequate testing, and bureaucratic arrogance. The inquiry does not assign blame to individuals, but the implication is clear: the Navy failed the submariners. The men in the forward torpedo rooms paid the price for that failure. But the inquiry also finds something else, something remarkable. Despite the defective weapons, despite the bureaucratic obstacles, despite everything, the submariners adapted, they improvised, they overcame, they developed workarounds in the field, shallower depth settings, disabled magnetic exploders, modified firing pins that the official establishment could not or would not provide. The torpedomen, the inquiry concludes, were the unsung heroes of the submarine war. Not the officers who planned the attacks, though they deserved credit, not the skippers who maneuvered into position, though they deserved credit too, but the enlisted men. The torpedomen's mates, the chiefs, the young sailors from farms and factories who slept beside the fish and kept them running, they were the ones who made victory possible. The technological legacy of the torpedo war is written in the design of every subsequent submarine weapon. The electric torpedo, the Mark 18, is refined and improved. Its wakeless, silent running becomes the standard for submarine warfare. The lessons of the Mark 14 crisis laid to more rigorous testing protocols, more realistic training exercises, more responsive channels for field feedback. Never again will American submariners be sent to war with weapons that do not work. But the human legacy is harder to quantify. In the decades after the war, the survivors of the submarine force gather at reunions. They stand together in hotel ballrooms, older now, gray-haired, stooped. They wear caps embroidered with the names of their boats. They shake hands with men they have not seen in 50 years. And sometimes, late at night, after the speeches and the dinners and the formalities, they talk. They talk about the forward torpedo room, about the heat, about the smell, about the sound of depth charges, about the faces of the men who did not make it. They talk about the fish. One veteran, a torpedoman's mate from the USS Tang, tells a story. His boat was sunk by its own torpedo, a Mark 18 that circled back and hit the submarine. He was one of only 9 survivors. He spent the rest of the war in a Japanese prison camp. He does not tell this story often. When he does, his voice cracks, his hands shake, but he tells it because someone has to remember. Another veteran from the USS Harder remembers the day his boat sank 3 destroyers in 4 days. He remembers the joy in the forward room after the 3rd kill. He remembers thinking they were invincible, and he remembers the telegram, years later, telling him that Harder had been lost with all hands on her next patrol. He carries a photograph of his shipmates in his wallet. He has carried it for 60 years. The photograph is faded now, creased, nearly falling apart, but the faces are still clear. Young men, smiling men, men who died in the forward torpedo room beside the fish. They had tended for months. The torpedo room crews were not famous. Their names do not appear in history books. Their faces are not on monuments, but they were there. They did the work. They paid the price. And their legacy lives on, in the submarines that still patrol the world's oceans, in the torpedoes that still arm those submarines, in the young men and women who still tend the fish in the cramped, hot, dangerous spaces where no one sees them. The technology has changed. The boats are bigger now, quieter, more capable. The torpedoes are smarter, faster, more reliable. But the job is the same. The reality is the same. Somewhere right now in a submarine on patrol, a young torpedoman's mate is checking his fish. He is setting depths, adjusting gyros, running diagnostics. He is sleeping in a bunk inches from a live warhead. He is breathing recycled air. He is waiting. Waiting for the word. Waiting to do his job. waiting to send the fish into the darkness. The war ended 70 years ago. The men who fought it are almost all gone now. The boats they served on have been scrapped or turned into museums. The torpedoes they fired have rusted on the bottom of the Pacific. But the story of the forward torpedo room, the heat, the smell, the fear, the courage, that story endures. It endures in the memories of the families who still tell it, in the records of the Navy that still study it, in the submarines that still sail, carrying the same traditions, the same responsibilities, the same deadly cargo. The fish are still there, and so are the men who tend them. The sea does not remember. The waters of the Palawan Passage have long since closed over the wrecks of Atego and Maya. The coral has grown over the hull of Darter, encrusting her torpedo tubes, her conning tower, her forward room where men once slept beside the fish. The steel decays, the names fade, the silence returns. But the silence is not empty. It carries echoes, the whoosh of compressed air, the chug of a Mark 14 running true, the thunder of depth charges, the voices of young men calling to each other in the red glow of battle lanterns, checking their fish, waiting for the word. They were not heroes in the way the word is usually used. They did not charge machine guns or storm beaches or plant flags on mountaintops. They were mechanics, technicians, plumbers and electricians and farmers' sons who learned to tend the most complex weapons of their age. They lived in spaces not designed for living. They breathed air not meant for breathing. They slept beside explosives powerful enough to vaporize them in an instant. And they did it not for glory, not for medals, not for history. They did it for each other. The forward torpedo room of a fleet submarine was the most dangerous workplace of the Second World War, but it was also a home, a place where men became brothers. Place where the line between life and death was measured in inches, the thickness of a pressure hull, the distance between a man and a warhead, the milliseconds between a depth charge's detonation and its arrival. The men who served there understood something that the rest of us struggle to grasp. They understood that the fish were not just weapons, they were promises, promises made to the enemy, promises made to history, promises made to the shipmates sleeping in the bunks nearby. And they kept those promises, every patrol, every attack, every time the word came. Down fire. The torpedoes ran, the targets fell, the war was won. Not by generals, not by politicians, not by the distant figures who make the decisions and write the histories, but by men like Henry Lopez, by men like Floyd Caverly, by men whose names appear in no history books, whose faces are remembered only by families, whose sacrifices are measured not in medals but in memory. They are gone now, almost all of them. The last of the torpedo room crews have slipped beneath the horizon, following their shipmates into the deep. But the fish remain. Not the Mark 14s, not the Mark 18s, not the weapons of that long-ago war, but the idea of the fish, the idea that a man can tend a weapon, can live beside it, can send it into the darkness, and in doing so, can change the world. The forward torpedo room is empty now. The bunks are gone. The smell of diesel has faded. The red battle lanterns are dark. But if you listen, if you really listen, you can still hear them. Young men checking their fish, waiting for the word. Stand by forward tubes. Fire one. And the sea, for just a moment, remembers.